Today I'm going to be building a bunch of the worst and cringiest scenes from the Star Wars franchise in LEGO. Beginning with by far the worst, the Rey Skywalker scene. So at the end of the sequel trilogy, Rey returns to Tatooine and gets confronted by this random old lady who proceeds to ask her her name, to which she replies Rey. Rey who, the old lady asks. And that's what led us to one of the worst and most infamous lines in the sequel trilogy, as she looks off into the distance seeing Luke and Leia's Force ghost and replies Rey Skywalker. So this scene will be pretty basic to build in LEGO, as there's not a crazy amount going on. I grabbed a small base and built up a small Tatooine landscape, ensuring I added lots of details to replicate the sand, including this small pile where she's just buried the lightsabers. With that done, I added Rey over here, and of course built the old lady, and now the scene is complete. Now that was quite a recent scene, but this scene has been causing controversy since the 80s, and that is the scene from episode 5 where Luke and Leia get a little too close considering their siblings. I again took a small base, building walls with lots of details, ensuring they had the indentations that we see in the scene. I left this gap for an entrance, and finished off the top with a few plates. Now it's tiling time, and I completely smoothed off the floor, adding in some grills, building this small bed, taking Luke and adding him, followed by this Han minifigure, as well as Chewie. And now here comes Leia, ready to give Luke a big old kiss. She's happy she's proved a point to Han, and he's looking pretty proud of himself.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
I think this mock turned out pretty well. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, but let's head back to Tatooine for the next mock, as we're heading to the Mandalorian TV show and the scene where Din Djarin reunites with Peli Motto in search for a new ship, and she shares a few uncomfortable details about her dating history.
Dated a jowl for a while. They're quite furry.
Huh? Anyway, moving on from that weird comment, we're building up a small base with a wall around the backside. I added in a small pipe for detail, tiling off the floor, leaving plenty of space to add in some detail later on. I sprinkled in a few pieces of small junk on the floor and began building up the back wall of the hangar. I'm adding in these shelves which will house some nice details with different mechanical parts and pieces of engines. I built up the wall and added in a second shelf, adding in a nice light fixture on the end with this small pipe running to it. I put together a few more contraptions and continued building up the back wall. Now I built the small table we see in the scene, adding in this engine onto the table, and the build was complete. Now it's just time to tie it together with a few minifigures. Peli Motto was placed on the left of the table, with my really nice looking upgraded Mando minifigure placed at the back. To the right of the table we placed the small BD droid, as well as Grogu being placed here on the table. And to represent the scene even more, I placed Peli Motto's ex-boyfriend here in an empty space on the left. And that's the mock fully complete. I really like the way it looks. So now we've built a few cool scenes, I thought it would be time to ask you guys what you think are the most cringy scenes in all of Star Wars. So I posted a poll up on Instagram about 24 hours ago, so let's see some of the suggestions. We've got a few people suggesting the entire sequel trilogy, so now whilst that's true I can't build all of that, but being a bit more specific, a lot of people suggested the somehow Palpatine return scene. So once again I made a base, this time making it out of dark green bricks and plates, layering it up with some wedge plates, adding in this big crate here with a plant and a light that we see in the background of the scene. I added a few more crates in front as well as a small plant, adding in some more terrain details and building our Poe minifig using this white open collared shirt and the satchel. So I added the background characters as well as this rebel pilot, and the scene was complete. I like the dark green terrain, and I think overall this summed up this shot pretty well.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Bruh. Next you guys suggested the Leia flying through space scene, so for this one I wanted to go with a slightly different base, putting down some light grey pieces on the right hand side here and using black pieces on the left to represent the depths of space, covering those in tiles, and laying down the next layer of grey, crafting where I wanted the side of the broken ship to go. Using wedge plates to get that splintered angle, I layered up the third layer and began working on the wall. Using some slope pieces I made this sort of groove, adding in these two pieces on the wall for extra detail, and then capping them off with a few more slope pieces. Now for the ground I made this as messy as possible, with as much rubble being sporadically placed all over the places. I finished the wall off with a couple more rows of plate, placing various different pipes on the floor that we see in the scene. And now the base of the model was done, it's time to recreate the scene with Leia. I don't actually have a minifig that perfectly represents her, so I used the legs of this skirt piece from Asajj Ventress. It's also a cape from Luke Skywalker, this old looking head, and a Leia hairpiece. I wish I had this in grey, but I had to stick with the reddish brown for now. I created a nice pose that looked like she was flying through space, and combined these transparent pieces to make it look like she was flying. Now I think that pretty accurately represents the open space in the ship that she's flying into. What did you think of the scene? I just really couldn't understand why this happened. We have a suggestion for Obi-Wan versus Anakin, which I think is completely crazy. If you mean this scene on Mustafar, you are completely wrong. I'm sorry to say it, but if you mean this scene from the Obi-Wan show, we can use this set, and with the power of force building I could build it up. With Vader standing here waiting for his foe, he hears the footsteps of Obi-Wan approaching. It's time to deploy the flames. Oh no, what is Obi-Wan going to do? There's a bit of fire in between him and his arch nemesis. Yeah, what a ridiculous scene, am I right? Let's get rid of that. Someone even suggested the most iconic scene, the hello there scene from episode 3. There's no way I'm building that in this video, but that was some of your best suggestions. I also think this Finn scene was pretty cringy, so let's build that. I'm going for a very small base for this one, adding in some nice wall pieces with some nice details on the far side. I strategically placed down some of these jumper plates. You'll find out why in a second, finishing off the rest of the mock with tiles. Once again I capped off the top of the wall some more plates, and now it's time for the water. I used a load of transparent pieces to make it look like the water was shooting out from his suit. These 5 pieces in blue really came in handy, and posed a piece in his hand looking like it was squirting out from his hip, and then built up and placed one more piece of water flooding out from the front of his body. I really think these give off a good effect, but I really still think it's a pretty cringy scene, but I guess it works as some comic relief for the kids. But something that really wasn't comic relief for the kids was this scene where Rose smashes into Finn's ship, but once making that idiotic mistake, she proceeds to to give one of the cringiest kisses we've seen in Star Wars. So for this I built up a small red border with white on top mimicking the salt flats on crate. I'm adding in a few areas of red on which I'll place some debris of the fallen ships, as these are areas that have been carved up by the flying debris. And for the rest of the model I finished it off with white tiles. I built up the remnants of the cockpit here and used it to get a gauge for where to place the red plates. I posed Finn in the cockpit and added Rose climbing up to give him a kiss. After this I posed a few areas of debris in the broken ship all around the crash site, including a couple of footsteps here so you can see the path Rose has trodden to get to Finn. I actually like the way this came out, as Crate is not a planet I've tried to build before. However, a planet I've definitely built before is Tatooine, so we're heading back there for our final scene.
I'll try spinning, that's a good trick.
And for this we're going to build the infamous spin move from the Book of Boba Fett finale. Now the show was horrific, but this scene summed it up, as one of the mods did this pointless spin move which was completely unnecessary and just looked frankly ridiculous. So as with our other Tatooine builds, I built up a small base, adding in these two arched pieces and building up a pretty basic wall behind them. Once I got to the appropriate height I realized it probably was a little bit too low, so I ended up taking this off and extending it by one more brick on the bottom. For the final time I added some jumper plates where our minifigures would stand and completely tiled off the area. Adding a lamp here on the left hand side of the build, and it was time now to add our minifigures. Of course we haven't had a Black Chrysanthemum minifigure, so I went with the darkest Wookiee I could find and gave him a custom blaster. And I made the mod minifigure out of some Obi-Wan robes, and I used this head here as I thought it best represented the sort of eyepiece he has. I gave him a small pistol, and now our final scene is complete. So these are just a few of the cringiest Star Wars moments from the entire franchise. Let me know what you thought of these. Let me know if I missed any scenes. I could definitely do a part 2 because there are a ton, especially with the new Disney era of Star Wars. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button. It really does go a long way, and we're trying to hit 100,000 subscribers right now, so make sure you press that big red button. And if you enjoyed this video, I definitely think you'd enjoy these two that are popping up on screen now. With that being said, I'll see you guys over there. Have a good day. Goodbye.